What's up, guys? My name is Willis Graves. I'm a Highland Games athlete. I've been throwing in the Highland Games for about 3 years now and have been throwing primarily in the lightweight class for about 2 of those 3 years. I wrote down a lot of goals at the beginning of the 2020 season, some things I wanted to accomplish and get done. A lot of those obviously were numbers based, things I wanted to hit in different events throughout the year, and I managed to accomplish some of them. But with the 2020 season being pretty much a wash with everything going on in the world right now, I figured it was probably as good a time as any to start focusing on one of the other goals that I set, and that is to start giving back to the sport and the community a little bit. I've had a lot of people invest in me and help coach me along the way, and in my start in the Highland Games, expecting nothing in return. I met a lot of good people, made a lot of good friends, and obviously that's part of the reason we love going to festivals and traveling long hours, is to go hang out with our friends and throw stupid things in a field. So I realized 3 years is very young in this sport. I'm not claiming to know everything or that anything I say is the right way and the only way to do things. I realize there's a lot more people with a lot more experience than I have, but just kind of wanted to start putting some stuff out there in hopes of maybe helping some people who are just getting into the sport, maybe some people who are interested in the sport and aren't sure what it's all about, and maybe even some more experienced throwers who maybe just want to view something through a different lens. So what I wanted to talk about today is some kind of practice philosophy and training talk about the Scottish hammers. This kind of stemmed from a conversation I had with a buddy of mine in the lightweight class a while back, Anthony Barrasso. We were talking about kind of what a typical hammer practice looks like for me, and then we kind of moved on to why I choose to use the drills that I use and why I choose not to use some of the more popular ones. And kind of why I choose to do that. And then also wanted to cover some common mistakes that I see with the more popular drills and maybe some tips on how to perform them correctly and get the most out of them with your training. I will say, if you're just getting into the Highland Games, and I do hope to do some more basic stuff about the Scottish hammer in the future, but I would recommend checking out Matt Vincent. Has some great videos on how to throw the hammer. He's got a lot of videos that a lot of people have watched when they get into the sport on all the different events, and just kind of some basic technique stuff on how to get you started. And also one that I will highly recommend that I watched when I got into the sport is Justin Blatnick's YouTube video series on how to throw the Scottish hammer. That really helped me a lot. It kind of helped me understand some of the terminology and the technique strategies used in the Scottish hammer when I got started. So I would definitely recommend checking those out, and I'll put a link in the description to both of those. So, common drills for the Scottish hammer. The typical ones I see used and that I feel like most people know about and choose to implement in their training are the 1-wind drill or 2-wind. I feel like the 1-wind is more popular, so I'm going to focus on that one. The 1-wind, the 5-wind, and then 10 winds. So, starting with the 1-wind. Some people want to crucify me for this, but I do not use the 1-wind drill in my training at all. I feel like I cannot mimic the way that I want to finish in a full throw with a 1-wind, and typically that's what the 1-wind is used for, is to kind of get used to the feeling at the finish. We want specificity with our drills. Obviously, we're not going to do a drill if it's not going to carry over and be somewhat specific to a full event, because we already have 9 different events, so we don't need to add anything else on top of that. So typically what I see most people do in their 1-winds is they start like they're going to start in their full throw, which usually is a little slower than we're going by our 3rd wind. So I don't set a good orbit. I can't connect early at all. I'm probably going to connect somewhere in here, and then all I can do at that point is yank it into the field, get real short with my arms, because I'm trying to beat my 1-wind PR. So this is what I typically see most people do. Okay, again, I connected here. All I can do at that point is yank it. Okay, there's nothing I can do to push it around me. I got to yank it out of orbit and try and get it into the field. As opposed to, hopefully I can do this right, if I really accelerate it off the ground and get it high to where I can catch, and then hopefully push it around into the field. So let's see if I can do this right. Somebody who does a much better job of this than I do is my buddy Garrett Blatnick. Sending a lot of love to the Blatnick brothers this video. He does a really good job of establishing a good orbit to where he can connect and push around. And I'm going to put in a video analysis of him doing a one wind properly here in just a second. So again, the reason I don't use the one wind in my training is because of specificity. If I start the one wind like I do in my typical full throws, which is where I follow more of a Dan McKim philosophy of the first wind is literally just to get it moving, okay? I'm going to be going a little slower and a lot slower than I need to be if I want to mimic a full finish, at which point it's not specific to the way I finish. Or I can do it in a way to where I try and mimic a finish of a full throw, at which point I'm going to have to really accelerate it off the ground in order to move it and set the orbit like I talked about, at which point it's not specific to the way I start my full throws, which is slower. It may seem nitpicky, but that's just kind of the way I view it, and I feel like I get more carryover from the drills I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. But let me show you this, this analysis of Garrett's one wind real quick.
So one thing I really like about the way Garrett does his one winds is that he does a really good job of putting a lot of force into it from the get-go in order to establish a good orbit and be able to connect with the hammer early on the right side and push it all the way around the left into the field. So, and this applies to whether you choose to begin with a dynamic start or a static start. You can start your one winds or any of your drills really in the same way you start your full throws, but specifically in the one winds, whichever way you choose to do them, you have to put enough force into the hammer to establish a good orbit in order to connect. Otherwise, the hammer is just going to kind of passively fall on your right side, and you're just going to have to yank it, get real short, and try and pull it into the field. So, you can see here he gets a good pop off the ground, and one kind of landmark I want you to look at is when this hammer gets behind him, it's over the level of his head, okay? A lot of people, and especially when I started throwing, I had a real issue with heavy hammer. I was not very good at applying force from the get-go, so that hammer, the hammer head would be like here, and I would just kind of have to reach around, and then my first wind ended up being really, really passive. So we got to get a lot of pop off the ground in order to get up here, turn the upper body around, and you can see here he begins with the torso, and that hammer moves with him. He starts pushing down on the right, rides it all the way around the left side into the field. The upper body's going to have to counter some. Obviously, we're not just a steel column that the hammer can rotate around perfectly. But he doesn't pull away hard. His arms stay long, and he's able to push and get this nice, tall finish into the field over that left side block.
All right, so hopefully some of that information can help you maybe fix some things with your one winds if you feel like you kind of notice yourself making some of the mistakes that I mentioned here, and will help you if you choose to implement that in your training. Again, what I say doesn't go for everybody. That's just the way I view it. If you get carryover from your one winds and you don't feel like you get stuff from the other drills I'm about to talk about, dude, do you, that's perfectly fine. So the drills I choose to use in my training are the 5 wind and the 10 wind drills. I feel like they really help supplement my hammer throws well and help me ingrain technique better than my one winds. I have very, very little experience with Olympic hammer throwing. I threw Olympic hammer for about 6 months and was not very good at it at all. But typically in Olympic hammer training, you see them doing more winds in practice or turns in practice than you do in competition. So you're going to see guys doing 5, 6 turns in practice as opposed to just doing. I haven't really seen many Olympic hammer throwers do 1 turns in training, at least not to the amount that they do 5, 6, higher level turns. So I kind of understood the principles of why, it made sense in my brain, but I wasn't really sure how to put it into words. So I got in touch with Sean Donnelly. Sean Donnelly, if you don't know, is one of the USA's top Olympic hammer throwers right now, pushing for the Olympics. So he kind of helped me visualize how to put this into words, and he said the more turns you do, the more stuff that's going to go wrong. So the little inconsistencies that you have in your 3-4 turns are going to get emphasized as you move on to 5-6 turns. So that's going to, I feel like for me, that I apply that same train of thought to Scottish Hammer. The things I do wrong in my 2nd and 3rd wind really start showing up in my 5th, 6th, 7th wind. So that helps me ingrain that technique over and over, and especially every throw in competition is not going to be perfect. If you lose your balance just a little bit, you're not always going to be able to catch that hammer and call for a restart. You're going to need to be able to recover and finish that. And that, I feel like that really helps me once I move into like 7, 8, 9, 10 winds, and especially considering that I try to add progressive speed with these drills. One thing we want in our competition throws is progressive speed. There's no point in doing multiple winds if every wind is the same speed. You're just wasting energy at that point. So with my 5 wind drills and my 10 wind drills, and you can do these where you just throw it into the ground at the finish, or you finish into the field like a throw. It's up to you. When I do my 10 winds, I typically finish into the ground, and on my 5 winds, I'll typically throw. So what I want to do here is, and as you warm up to these, you could start slower, but as I move into the ones where I'm really trying to hit my steps here, I'm going to try and start at the same speed that I do in my competition throw, and then once I reach competition speed in my 3rd wind, I go into winds 4 and 5 still trying to add progressive speed. So that helps me get comfortable with just going faster, which is something Zach Riley has talked about before. I heard him talk about it on a podcast a while back, and it sounds silly, but you can have great technique, great strength, but a lot of what is going to help with throwing is just getting comfortable moving fast, like insanely fast, like beyond the point of comfort, to where that now becomes the normal. And that's something I've struggled with weights, and especially lightweight for distance, is just trying to learn, I'm hitting my positions, but if I can't just start adding crazy speed, I'm not going to hit big numbers that I want to hit. So I kind of apply that to my 5 winds. So now I keep using these in my training, and if I start being able to hit faster and faster speed and keep it under control and finish correctly in winds 4 and 5, now I can hopefully move that speed that I hit in winds 4 and 5 and move that up to winds 3 and 4, and now have a new gear at wind 5. And then as that becomes more comfortable and I can manage that, then that same speed now moves up to winds 2 and 3, and I can use it in my competition throws. So that speed that was once now almost nearly out of control and unattainable by the time I hit wind 5, I can now hit in my competition throw by wind 3. So, and again, it's pretty much the same principle for the 10 winds. I might start a little slower because it's really hard to add progressive speed through 10 consecutive winds, but really I'm just getting comfortable with the thought of controlled chaos. I hear that people use that term a lot, and that's kind of where a lot of throws, big throws, need to happen, is just right on the verge of uncontrollable. So a lot of times in my 10 winds, I'm just trying to go, and yes, I'm still trying to hit my positions, but I'm trying to go as fast as I possibly can by wind 10, at which point I'll just throw it into the ground. And that just gives me more and more comfortable with that feeling of controlled chaos. Yeah, so hopefully I was able to give a little bit of insight on my hammer training philosophy and the way I approach it, and why I use the 5 and 10 wind drills as opposed to the 1 wind drill. And if you do choose to use any of these drills in your training, hopefully I was able to maybe give you some tips on how to better implement them in your training. Like I said, what I say doesn't go for everybody. I want y'all to do what works best for y'all and helps y'all be better throwers. I would like to keep doing more of these videos, start moving into different events. Like I said, I don't claim to know everything by any means, but I love talking Highland games, talking technique, just talking about the sport in general. So if y'all want me to cover something or revisit anything, or anybody wants to do any videos together, just hit me up. I have Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. So yeah, take advantage of this long off season and keep training hard. See y'all.